ready. Welcome to episode 55 of the Go Get 'em Agility podcast. My name is Margaret, and I'm your host. I'm still going over all of the sections of my beginning foundation class. Section A was Recalls to Heal, and that was podcast 52. Then in podcast 53, I did a combination of cues and side changes for the front cross and the blind cross. In episode 54, I did rear crosses, so sticking with the side changes. So now we're on section C, which is turns. And there are essentially two turns that dogs do. One of them is turning into us, and one of them is turning away from us. And so we talked a lot about the rear cross, having the dog turn away from us on the rear cross. But there are a couple of other turns in there that dogs do that does not include a side change. So when we're talking about turns, when we're doing a side change, the front cross, the dog's turning into us with a side change. And then the rear cross is the dog turning away from us with a side change. But there are also two turns where we don't do a side change. And again, one of them is turning into us, the other is turning away from us. But both of those would be without side changes. The turn into us is called a pull turn. I see it as we're pulling on the dog, and the dog is turning into us like we're pulling on their nose. So we're pulling on them and they're turning into us. Now, the pull turn is the natural turn for the dogs. They naturally want to turn into us. The turn where they're turning away from us without a side change would be a push. So a push turn. The pull turn is, in my opinion, the most used turn in agility. And while it is the easier one for the dogs, there are actually some interesting things that dogs do with the pull turn, especially our herding breeds. So our herding breeds can end up going quite wide on the pull turn. And in fact, some border collies will do what's called flanking, which means as they're looking at you, they're traveling away from you. So they're flanking out away from the handler. And a lot of times this flanking can cause dogs to turn into us, but go to the outside of an obstacle. That's a pretty common early border collie problem. And so that definitely needs to be addressed. The other thing is that dogs have a certain bubble that they run in with their handlers. They will have a certain distance that they like to be, and even on just a regular walk. You have some dogs that just travel a foot away from you or travel 2 feet away from you laterally on your side. And you can train away from that. You can train a dog to travel in closer to you by working on heel work. People who bike ride, they will have a bigger bubble. They'll want a bigger bubble, but not so big that you're tripping people on a bike path. But in agility, when we are doing the pull turn, and the pull turn is when the dog is turning into us and we're having them turn either on a jump or even just on an arc in running towards the next obstacle. They may be looking for obstacles and going to obstacles, but as they're turning, as they're navigating the agility course, as you're navigating the agility course, they're keeping this natural bubble at your side. And if they get too far in front, they will start to curve into you, almost onto your other side. And if they get too far behind you, sometimes they'll come up on your inside as well. Because that natural arc that they do, if they're not on the side of you, then they naturally want to just keep curling in. A lot of dogs. This is not every dog, but this is a lot of dogs. When we're looking at the pull turn, how a dog goes around a jump stanchion onto the next path that you want can be completely dependent on not only their breed, but also what you've trained. So if you've only ever just taught them to take jumps and not how to bend and arc, then they will naturally take the jump and stay on the arc that they're naturally drawn to, or that you've naturally encouraged through training and lack of collection training. And when they jump on their natural arc, if they're not taught how to come back in on that pole turn, then they can actually arc quite wide, which can cause them to end up on a path that the handler wasn't expecting. A couple of things that I do for the pole turn is help the dog with the pole turn by working on big swooping circles that we run together. So my dog is in heel position on the outside of the circle, and I'll start with fairly big circumference of a circle, so probably about 10 feet in circumference, maybe 15 feet in circumference, and teaching my dog how to just stay on my side. And as my dog gets better and better, that circumference of that circle will vary depending on what I'm trying to train. So if I want to think about running 100 by 100 foot ring, and the judge has put all the obstacles on the outside of a 100-foot ring, then I want to work a circle that's actually quite large to work in how it feels to run that 100-foot on my side or near my side, and teaching my dog some lateral distance that they can stay with me even though we're doing these big swooping lateral circles. But then I also, on the other spectrum of that, I want to work super tight circles, almost where I'm pivoting in place and the dog is doing all the work going around me, to help show them that they can turn quite tight and quite quickly around me. So as if they are going around a jump wing, but instead we are circling together and I'm spinning. And this exercise does cause vertigo. So be very, very careful with this exercise. So that's one thing that I do to help my dog understand how to stay next to me. And as my dog gets stronger, and I start to include obstacles into this scenario, then I also start to build in more and more lateral distance so that my dog can do the 100-foot arc of jumps along one side of an arena, and I can take the shorter path and do a smaller circumference while my dog does the larger circumference. But my dog is pulling into me because they're bending into me and they're turning into me. So the severity of the pole turn is completely dependent on what you are trying to accomplish in your agility goals. So I'm looking for my dog, I'm looking for big, open, swooping arcs that I want my dog to do a pole turn on. And then I'm looking for very, very tight pole turns around one wing or coming out of a tunnel and arcing right back towards me in a very small circumference of an arc. So let's talk a little bit about the push turn. Now, the push turn, in my opinion, for the dog is much harder for the dog to accomplish. And that timing for the handler, or the location of the handler, does play a big factor in whether or not the push turn is accomplished correctly or seamlessly. There are certain rules that I see that come with the push turn. First off, imagine that it is a turn away from the handler, but no side change. For every single push turn that's out there, in my opinion, this is my opinion, definitely let me know if you're like, no, that's a push turn and you don't need this rule. The rule that I have and the rule that I tell my students is if you're going to do a push turn, you need to be in front of the dog. You have to be able to show the push back out to an obstacle. And so the push turn is a combination, when we're doing it in agility, it is a combination of a recall to extension and then into a push. And so when we're teaching push turns, we want the dog to understand that our body, our foot, our hand signal, our eye contact is going to indicate you're going back out away from me. And so I start the push turn very, very similar to how I teach the pull turn, except now my dog is on the inside of my circle work. So again, I'm jogging in a giant circle. My dog is at heel. And for the push turn, my dog's on the inside of the circle. And when we're doing the push turn with the dog on the inside of the circle, we want to teach them to stay at or just behind our leg, our hip. Laterally, they're away from us, but they're slightly behind us, so that because they naturally want to pull into us, right? And so for the push turn, in order to teach it, you want to be in front of the dog just slightly, but not so in their face that they want to get out of there and get to the other side. So you want to teach them how to walk next to you, but you're turning into them. And again, the circumference of your circle varies on what you're trying to train. So I start with, maybe a 10 foot circumference of a circle. And I'm walking that 10-foot circumference with my dog on my inside, and lots of eye contact through this. You have to know where your dog's at. You have to watch their intentions for what they're wanting to do, what they're understanding to do. I like to have a hand signal that gives them direction of where they're going. So in the very beginning, I do a cookie transport, and I'm literally luring my dog to stay in position. And as my dog gets stronger in their behavior and their understanding, then my hand is up there as a guide for teaching my hand signals, stay on this side. So when my hand is up, it's indicating to my dog, stay on the side that my hand is up. And so I will do a 10-foot circumference. And again, I'll get bigger and bigger, and then I'll also get very, very, very small. And when I'm getting very, very small, I'm essentially having the dog do a pivot in place. So their front feet aren't moving very much, and their back feet are moving a little bit more. But keeping my dog on a very, very tight circle is a very strong push turn, and pushing them to stay next to me, but they're also moving very, very minimally, and I'm moving a little bit more on the outside of that circumference. So the circumference is maybe 1.5 feet, depending on the size of the dog, but maybe 1.5 feet, and my dog's front feet are essentially just picking up and putting right back down in the same spot. The push turn you're going to use a lot for serpentine work. You're going to use the push turn for like a lead out push would be a push turn. There's a lot of times when there's like an offset jump that you're going to need to push your dog out towards. Push turns are used a lot in collection or collection training. So teaching our dogs the push turn and the pull turn, I would say that the push turn is definitely the harder of the two turns for most dogs, but I would definitely focus on flanking that some herding dogs can do. And so modifying my training to work the prevention of flanking and teaching my dog that they can stay next to me. When we're talking about the push turn, we're talking more about convergence. And when we're talking about the pull turn, the dog will sometimes, especially border collies, herding dogs, the pull turn will cause more divergence, whereas the push turn will cause more convergence. So the training that I do for the push turn, the pull turn with circle work, I will also start to branch that out into a combination of the dog doing a recall to heel into either a push turn or a pull turn. So my dog's coming in on a straight line. I'm showing them which hand they're coming in on, and I'm either doing a pull turn or a push turn. As they catch up to me, I start to slow them down, or they naturally start to slow down for the cookie that's in my hand. And then I will either bring them a little bit forward and we'll do a pull turn, or I'll hold them back with the cookie transport. So wherever my hand is, I expect my dog's nose to learn to navigate into my hand. And so if I have my hand further back, then I expect my dog to collect and hold further back. And as they do hold, then I can start to put on a push turn and create the circle into my dog. But you cannot create the circle into your dog until you have them coming in under control. Because if they just do a flyby where they fly right past you, you won't notice it as much in the pull turn because they can self-correct and come back and nobody's injured. But if you try and turn prior to a dog being under control next to you on a push turn, they will collide right into your legs and can potentially trip you. And so teaching them that the hand is out, and teaching them to come into the hand. And as they come into the hand and I know that my dog's slowing down, then and only then do I start to do the push turn into them. One of the ways that you can tell that a dog didn't know that a push turn was coming is that when they take a jump, they cannot change the arc of from their lift to their landing. So they can't change that arc. And if you step into their path because you're trying to show them a push, once they've lifted, they cannot change their arc and they will literally slam into your legs or into your knees. And so the push turn, they have to see it prior to grabbing a jump. And if they don't, then you are in danger of either you getting hurt by your dog hitting you, or your dog getting hurt because you're slamming into them. So small dogs suffer from the push turn because the handler steps on them, and the large dogs collide with the handlers, and both of them can be injured, but the handler is more likely to fall, causing injury. I work the push turn and the pull turn in my big circumference circles without any equipment. So on the flat, in parking lots, stores, I've done it on hikes, I've done it at just the park. So anywhere and everywhere, just doing a push turn and a pull turn, making sure that you work both sides. So a push turn on your right, pull turn on your right, push turn on your left, pull turn on your left. And if you have a tendency to favor one side over the other, then definitely double down on the side that you don't normally walk your dog on, because that's generally the side that will suffer in training. Once my dog has an understanding of a push turn and a pull turn on the flat, so flat without equipment, then I'll put the push turn and the pull turn on a cone or a jump stanchion. So usually I start on a cone first. So most of my training is done on cones first, and then I transition it over to a jump stanchion. But you can also do this on a host of different stuff. So I've done it around X-pens. So setting up an X-pen on a square, and then I'm either going around the X-pen and the dog's on the outside. So we're both on the outside of the X-pen, or whatever we're going around. We're together, dog's on the outside, and so on doing a pull turn around something, or the dog's on the inside and I'm turning them in towards whatever that obstacle is or whatever the item is. So I'll do pull turns around trees, then I'll flip it and I'll do push turns around trees. And If I'm going around the tree as well as my dog, then I'm working a push turn. If I'm not going around the tree or the jump stanchion or the cone, and only my dog is turning away from me, then I'm working a rear cross, or a tandem turn. So a pull turn, if I'm going around the obstacle as well as my dog, then we're just working pull turns. But I can also work the pull turn on a cone, and just the dog goes around the cone, or just the dog goes around the tree, or just the dog goes around literally anything. I mean, I've had students tell me they work on their dining room table chairs, stools, laundry baskets, just a host of different things. In fact, one time I was at a park, and there was this huge, wide but low hedge, and I had my dog going all the way around the hedge and then coming back to me. So that would be a pull turn. One of the great things about doing the push turn around different obstacles, so crates, X-pens, trees, people, corners in your house, so hallway corners, is that when you are on the outside and your dog's on the inside, so they're closest to whatever you're going around on the push turn, you're teaching them how to be comfortable next to stuff, next to equipment, next to a cone, next to a wall, next to a crate, next to a tree, and that being squished just a little bit. So I say squished, but I don't mean I want you to squish your dog. I don't want you to squish your dog. But having them close to something and feeling the pressure that both you and whatever thing you're going next to is a really good thing, because that's what we want them to feel and be comfortable with going next to tunnels and next to jump stanchions and next to weave poles, right? These weave poles are going to be touching them on the side. And so if they're used to being close to different things like a wall or a crate or a stool or walls, the corners of your house, then they're going to be more comfortable eventually with equipment, agility equipment. And I think that that's a really beneficial thing. But you have to know your dog, and you have to pay attention to if your dog is worried about being so close or so squished between you and the wall, or you in a crate. And so a couple of things that you can do before you go and venture out onto different funky equipment. A couple of things that you can do is, one, teach your dog how to weave in between your legs. So being underneath us and going in between our legs, wrapping in between our legs, can be a very intimidating thing for dogs. And so the more that they get comfortable being underneath you, the easier it is for them to be comfortable being near and under things in agility. Also, just a side note, complete side note, my dog being underneath me is where I teach my dog to come to in an emergency. And so anytime that there's an emergency, I want them to come in between my legs and underneath me, so that if I do have to grab them, they're used to that position and I have an easier time of grabbing them if I have to. So you having your dog come underneath you is not only beneficial for safety reasons, or at least for me, but also it teaches them some pressure around different stuff that can lead to better understanding that they can have pressure on agility obstacles. Just a little side note about the hand signal and eye contact that I use in my push turn and my pull turn circumference circle work, and that is that my eye contact and my hand signal are extremely important in both my pull turn and my push turn. What I want my dogs to learn is that whatever hand is out and whatever side I'm looking at, they are to stay on that side until I give them permission to change sides. And so our eye contact and our hand signals is our side indicators for our dogs. And if my hand is out, and I teach my dog that which hand equals which side, because I give them a lot of rewards in whatever hand is extended. So the hand's not just out there being boring. The hand is out there being dynamic in the way that I reward. So I'm rewarding with the hand that I want them to stay on. I'm making it exciting to follow that hand. And I'm doing that just systematically, day by day by day by day, building up more and more. So in the very beginning, I was doing an actual cookie transport where literally the dog was licking food out of my fingers, following my hand. And over time, I could lift my hand out of their nose a little bit. They would stay with me for a step or two, reward them again, and just building that up. I would do nose touches. I would do where they hold their nose next to me. So I call it hold, where it literally, when I say the word hold, it means that you keep your chin or your cheek on within my palm, within the cup of my hand. I have lots of different ways that I've taught my dog to stay in heel position. I've used pivot pods to help train this. So just lots of different ways to help teach the push and the pull. When I am teaching the pull turn and the push turn, I am looking at how the dog is tracking with their front feet and their back feet. So in the very beginning, their front feet and their back feet will track on the same line because of the circumference of my circle. But as my dog gets stronger, and as I want to just build different things, then I'll also work on pivoting. And pivoting is where the front feet stay on one track and the back feet take another track around the front feet. And so you can have pivoting where the dog is pivoting towards you, and you can have pivoting where the dog's pivoting away from you. And so I work on both of those, and they do affect your push and your pull turn a little bit. I do use it for the push and the pull turn, but most of my focus is actually on rear end awareness for my contact training. So starting to build in some behaviors, not only for contact training, but also for physical fitness, for learning how to pick up their toes for jump work. So there's lots of different things that the pivot does as well, but it does start to touch on the push and the pull turn. So just wanted to throw that out there, that that's very micro turns, very small turns that are part of the push and the pull turn, but it's more advanced training as well. And so I start with just big circumference, changing the circumference of my circle, spiraling smaller, spiraling bigger. And then I work towards pivot training as well, using a pivot pod or a balance pod, and then eventually a flat target, and then eventually no target at all, just working on pivots next to me in heel position. All right, for my circumference work, when I am working my circumference work, there's two different routes that I also start to go. One of them is I start to increase the speed of both myself and my dog. So when we increase speed, we're increasing adrenaline, we're increasing energy, we're increasing dogs getting excited, so the excitement mode. And so the faster that we are running, the harder it is for our dogs to concentrate and to figure things out. And so I start with just a little jog, and then I build up to a full out run. And then I go back into a jog, then back into a walk. So I will start to randomly pick up different speeds with my dog and see if my dog can change their speeds with me, which was very, very indicative of agility, right? We race into a couple of obstacles, then we slow down, we do a decel to turn. We want our dogs to decel with us. And if they haven't learned how to decel, then they do a ton of flybys, or they arc out really big, and arcing out can cause the dog to go on the incorrect path. It also can cause them to take incorrect obstacles or just waste time, right? So sometimes we need those extra seconds to get us, under standard course time. Other times we're trying to hit the podium, and the tighter the turn is, possibly the faster the dog is, right? So kind of depends on speed versus turning radius. But if you can have a combination of both, is speed into a jump and then do a super tight turning arc so that you can speed right back out of it, those microseconds that you pick up are going to start to add up, and they can make the difference between first place and fifth place sometimes. So we want the dogs to have these super tight turning arcs if possible, and they learn that in foundation training. They learn the mechanics of how to go from super fast to super slow, how to go from big circumference arcs down into a tiny circumference arc. So, running in a 10 to 15 foot circumference circle, and then immediately into a 3 foot, 1.5 foot circumference circle, and then right back out into a big circumference circle. This is all really good training for our dogs to do, and for them to learn how to pay attention to what we're doing, our decel, our hand signals, staying on one side. And we are also learning how to watch our dogs, pay attention to what they're doing, keep them with us so that they don't dodge over to the incorrect side. So lots of really good stuff with just flat push turn and pull turn training. And then we can add in all the obstacles, right? Once we understand, the dogs understand how to stay with us, then we can start to add in jump stanchions, and we're building up jump stanchion work on its own, or obstacle work on its own, and then starting to include it into our circle work. So in the beginning, when I'm doing circle work, and remember, this is me and the dog jogging in a big circle together. So it's not spin work. It's not the dog doing circles at my side. This is me and the dog running together. Also, when I'm doing circle work, I will also start to add in some impulse control stuff and some verbal discrimination behaviors, like and weight behaviors. So I'll have my dogs do a moving down, or starting with a stop down, but a moving down. So I'm doing a big 10-foot circumference circle, and then I ask my dog to lay down while I continue jogging on that same circle, or on a straight line. It can change however I want to do it. But my dog learning how to lay down while I move is a very valuable skill, because that's what they're going to have to do for the teeter. That's what they're going to have to do for weave pulls. That's what they're going to have to do for the pause table. So there are all these behaviors that our dogs are forced into slowing down, and we want the ability to keep moving to help cut off lines, or just to build in some stronger behaviors for our dogs. So that's one thing that I start to do, is add in moving weights or moving downs, moving sits, while I'm doing these big circumference circles. And I will do that not only on a pull turn, but also on a push turn. Then also add in verbal discrimination of when to stay with me. So I'll start to teach a by cue, and that means stay by my side. So I'll pat my side, whichever side my dog is on. I'll start to pat my leg or my hip, and I cue the word bye. And so I will start to include my verbal by cue within those pull turns and those push turns. And then I'll start to add that into a tunnel's out. And can my dog stay with me as we pass a tunnel? And can my dog go into the tunnel when I cue the tunnel? So teaching verbal discriminations within the pull turn or the push turn. So that's all stuff that I do. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with the pull turn and the push turn, but they have to understand how to do the pull and the push turn on the flat without any equipment, without any moving weights. And once they do, you can build in this really dynamic training strategy that includes a ton of stuff. So there's section, what section is that? There's section C, turns. Push turn, pull turn. Those are both without side changes. So a pull turn is towards turning into us without a side change. A push turn is turning away from us without a side change. And then a front cross is a turn into us with a side change. And a rear cross is a turn away from us with a side change. So there you go. That's section C. Turns. All right. Happy training. Woof woof.